The jelly bean, the slipper, the flying potato, the sedan of the future.
Born to see the future, and now the future is here.
Call it what you want, but the Ford Taurus saved the Blue Oval's booty in the 80s, and for a brief time turned the automotive world upside down and inside out. So gather around, you little RoboCops, and learn what this bull is all about. This is everything you need to know to get up to speed on the Ford Taurus. Thank you to Turo for sponsoring this week's episode. If you haven't checked it out yet, Turo is the easiest way to drive sick cars without the hassle of going to a car rental place. Plus, it's legitimately way cheaper. Turo's available in over 5,500 cities. You can choose from over 850 makes and models. Seriously, name it, they have it. You ever tried to rent a Porsche from? It's very hard. You ever tried to rent a Porsche from Turo? Very easy. Click the link below and sign up to get $25 off your first trip when you enter the promo code SPEED. That's SPEED, S-P-E-E-D. By 1985, Ford was $3 billion in the red and going nowhere fast. North American consumers were crushing on them Japanese cars more than Godzilla's little piggies. Japanese manufacturers were considered much more reliable and fuel efficient than their Detroit counterparts. And to make matters even worse, Henry Ford II, aka Hank the Deuce, had insisted Ford stay the disastrous course of developing boxy, chromed out, overweight, and inefficient vehicles like the LTD, which is actually a very sick car. I want one very badly. Fortunately for shareholders and employees, Hank the Deuce retired just as a dude by the name of Louis Veraldi started developing a revolutionary mid-sized sedan that could help Ford compete with the imports. He nicknamed the project Taurus after his wife, not because she was like a bull, but because Taurus the bull was her astrological sign. Louie, honey, what's my horoscope say?
Let me see here. Taurus, with Mercury in retrograde. Don't be surprised if your husband develops a nameplate that sells over 2 million units in the first generation of production and single-handedly saves Ford from bankruptcy. Huh, do you actually believe this nonsense?
But it turns out it wasn't nonsense. Veraldi implemented a team mentality by gathering all the production department's designers together so that they could design the car from the ground up. This minimized internal competition and increased the overall reliability and cohesiveness of the design, because teamwork makes the dream work. While team design is a standard practice now and potentially ruined cars, in the 80s it was as groundbreaking as Henry Ford's original moving assembly line from 1913. The result was a front-wheel drive sedan and wagon variant that focused on build quality and futuristic styling, and the car sold like hotcakes when it launched in 1986.
Now there's an American car with the shape and the feel we've never seen before. Taurus.
Do people still buy hotcakes? That seems like a bad analogy these days. Coffee makes more sense, or meth. So the 1986 Taurus sold like meth. But why? Well, first off, it looked like something from the future. Design elements like flush glass and bonded frameless quarter windows hadn't been done before. In fact, Ford was worried that design was a little too futuristic for consumers, particularly the nose, which did away with the conventional grille and opted for a bottom feeder design instead. It was so futuristic looking that RoboCop drove one in the 1987 smash hit RoboCop.
Dead or alive, you're coming with me.
But soon, Ford's worries subsided as customers flocked to dealerships and demanded they sell them the curvy mid-sized sedan. The completely new Taurus came with completely new engines, like the fuel-efficient 2.5-liter HSC, which stood for high swirl combustion. It was a 4-cylinder, which pumped out 90 horsepower. The optional Vulcan 60-degree V6, which bumped out 140 horsepower. And in 1988, the top trim line came with the Essex 90-degree V6, which was good for a solid 200 horsepower. The handling was also sweet, as Ford incorporated independent suspension and McPherson struts in order to give auto journalists something to write home to mommy about. Dearest mother, I am writing to tell you I just drove the soon-to-be-released Ford Taurus station wagon and can say with the utmost confidence that it handled better than the Audi 5000. Say hi to Jimbo and Grandma for me. July 1985. Consumers were all about both the Taurus sedan and wagon. Why drive a boxy Chevy Celebrity when you can look like a celebrity in a curvy Taurus? Ford sold 1 million Tauruses in the first 3 years. Instead of resting on their laurels, Ford kept the pedal to the metal and decided to do something crazy. They threw in a Yamaha 3-liter V6 iron block aluminum head 24-valve dual overhead cam engine with an innovative variable length intake manifold that revved to 7,000 RPM. Lightning! The engine was originally developed for a mid-engine 2-seater to compete with the Pontiac Fiero and Toyota MR2, but that got scrapped. So Ford put them in the Taurus starting in 1989, 6 years before Post Malone was born. They named it the Show, which stood for super high output. The Show was good for 220 horsepower and was coupled with a sick 5-speed manual developed by Mazda. By the time Ford launched the second-gen model in 1992, the Taurus had become the best-selling car in North America. Despite being a completely new design, the second-gen looked more like a first-gen refresh. The Show got an automatic transmission, and you can occasionally see Conan O'Brien driving his '92 Show around LA. To this day.
In its day, this was quite a sexy car. Do you believe that? No.
Despite strong sales numbers, Ford didn't want the design to get stagnant, so they asked designer Doug Gafka to make something that looked way different than their best-selling car in America while maintaining the oval theme. The third generation was released in fall of 1995 for the 96 model year, and it is probably the most 90s car that is ever 90s. Longer, heavier, and bubblier. Gafka took the Jelly Bean design to the extreme, eliminating anything that resembled a straight line, and unfortunately also eliminating the consumer. It looks the exact same this way or this way. You could move the dash to the back and drive it and it would look exactly the same. Less than half of third-gen Tauruses were sold to the public, making the Bubble Taurus Rex the king of the fleet cars, as that's where most of them were unloaded. My dad had one that his boss gave him. The third-gen Show was also a bit of a dumpster fire because they did away with the manual transmission and gave the car a 3.2-liter V8. Sounds cool, but the engine suffered from separation of the camshaft from its sprockets, and since the valve train was an interference design, this led to the pistons and valves colliding and destroying the engine at around 50,000 miles. Fun! Ford quit making the Show in 1999. Ford tried to dial back the third-gen design in 2000 with the launch of the more traditional fourth-gen Taurus, but by this point, the Taurus had become a car synonymous with corporate fleets and rental agencies. Ford sold this Taurus through 2007, where they temporarily retired the nameplate. The late 2000s were a terrible time for American auto manufacturers, including Ford. Instead of making a single Taurus, Ford made a smaller, mid-size Fusion, a larger, full-size car called the 500, and a crossover wagon thingy named the Freestyle. What do the kids like? Freestyle. While the latter two cars sold well in other parts of the world, nobody wanted a 500 or a Freestyle in North America, so Ford tried to win back consumers by renaming them the 5th-gen Taurus and Taurus X. Nobody cared, and still nobody liked it. Ford went back to the drawing board and relaunched a fully redesigned 6th-gen Taurus in 2010. Gone was the mid-size everyman's car. Now the Taurus was a full-size highway destroyer. The new Taurus initially retained the 500's 263 horsepower 3.5 V6, which was modified in 2013 to produce 288 horsepower. Not bad. There were two notable variants that enthusiasts are drawn to. The The first being the rebirth of the show, which is powered by a 365 horsepower twin turbocharged V6 EcoBoost. And the second is the Police Interceptor, which came with a 3.7 liter V6, which was good for 305 horsepower. But Ford also offered Johnny Law a Respect My Authority upgrade, which featured the show engine in the Police Interceptor. I've said it before and I'll say it again. This is the best buy in cars right now. The editor of Bumper to Bumper bought one for like $2,000. Despite the cool variants, the Taurus never regained its footing in North America, and on March 1st, 2019, the last Taurus rolled off the assembly line. As my hero, RoboCop, would say, hasta la vista, baby. Thanks for watching Up to Speed and everything else on Donut. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at James Pumphrey. Follow Donut on Instagram and Twitter at Donut Media. Watch this episode of my son Nolan's show about the cheapest ways to go fast in a straight line. And watch this episode of my other show, I Love You. I'm not scared anymore, I love you.